Welcome to the show. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. This week we discuss development with Dr. Ayo Ajayi. We get your views on the issues as well. You're watching the Africa Leadership Dialogues. I'm Julie Gishuru. On the show this week, we speak with Dr. Ayo Ajayi. We focus on matters of development in Africa and reproductive health as well, and the role that the Gates Foundation is playing. Let's get straight to his views on the issues. Ayo, thank you so much for making time for the Africa Leadership Dialogues. For many Africans, we are hopeful that we will see change, and transformation is happening. In many spaces across Africa, it is happening. But there is the challenge that many people feel in their spaces, they are not able to take charge of their story. They're not able to be part of the transformation. And so you often have a mentality of, we're waiting for government. Government needs to do this. How can Africans start to take control and take charge of their own story?
Well, I mean, I think Africans are already beginning to do that, and not just the young people who are so connected with the rest of the world, but also older people too. There's a change in Africa over the last decade, I think, of much more active participation, much more involvement in governance, much more attentive to things that would improve their lives. Everyone is actually quite eager for development in Africa. And individually, I think the penetration of the media, the many social avenues, and just the sense overall of I can make my conditions better has made it quite much easier for us all in Africa to get a sense of development actually happening right before our eyes.
If you were to highlight countries where you see it happening more, what would those countries be?
Well, I think it's all across Africa. I mean, there's not a single country in Africa that I've been to in the last year or two that's not so much different from what it was, 10 or 15 years ago. Something is changing, and Africa is not left behind. I think the progress that's been made in many countries in just the increase in development activities, you realize that, when the global economy almost collapsed in 2007, 2008. Africa was largely spared of that. And Africa has continued to grow in many parts at very significant clip. All that suggests that, people are getting more and more involved, people are much more conscious of what they can do themselves, and governments are getting a lot more serious about development issues themselves. So I think, it's happening across Africa. In some countries, faster than others. Mm-hmm. I think, for instance, Ethiopia is a country that has grown tremendously in terms of its economic development over the last 10, 15 years. It used to be that, 20, 30 years ago, Ethiopia was probably the largest exporter of refugees in Africa. Now it's the single largest country that receives the largest number of refugees in Africa. And that just shows you the shift in the development in that country. I highlight it because I think it's probably the most visible, but it's not alone. I mean, across Africa, you see developments. In some places faster than others, but clearly there's a change in Africa.
Incredible that you were saying you see it everywhere in Africa, and that's good news. That's great news. Let's go to the role of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in transforming society, which in many ways is what it's trying to do across the globe. You're at the helm of the Africa operation. What are you most excited about in terms of where you are engaging?
Well, I'm excited about several things. One, because I think the timing is right for the kind of assistance that Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation offers, which is an opportunity to encourage Africans to develop themselves by forming the appropriate partnerships, by focusing on things that can actually be done both by government, but at an individual level, but also by providing a lot of the know-how, a lot of the technical assistance that makes things possible, make things happen, by introducing lots of innovations for countries. I think what I'm most happy about is the fact that the foundation is essentially a catalyst. What it does is catalyze its partners to introduce and to commit themselves to working with governments and civil society in order to make development happen. Everything the foundation does is through partnerships. The foundation has a lot of resources of its own, but it's not enough to solve all the problems that it sees around the world. It does what it does well by forming the appropriate partnerships because it has the credibility, it's got access to a lot of know-how, a lot of technical assistance, and it's almost everywhere. We work in over 45 countries in Africa, although we prioritize a few of them as being the ones we focus the most attention on.
Let's talk about sectors.
Okay.
And agriculture is a sector that I think offers so much promise to the continent. Healthcare has become a serious issue. Even as Africa transforms, we are there's an evolution in the challenges that we're facing in healthcare. So you tell me, what for you, which sectors are most exciting?
Well, I mean, both of those sectors are clearly very, very, very important, and we're very active in both agricultural and the health sector. But we're also active in the area of financial inclusion, which is financial services to the poor, which is actually facilitated by the increase in technology, and particularly by the penetration of mobile phones and smartphones in Africa, which really has leapfrogged the development of Africa in so many ways and makes it possible for innovative approaches to reach the average person has become more possible. But, when we talk about agriculture, I mean, our primary, belief is that, a large population of Africa is actually involved in smallholder agriculture. We know that, productivity can be increased 4, 5, 6 times in many of the countries. And we also know that the largest proportion of the human race has been lifted out of poverty through agricultural innovation. So what we try to do is to increase agricultural productivity and at the same time work with the governments to set up the policies that makes it possible for access to markets. Because our theory of change is that, individual agricultural productivity, particularly with smallholder farms, which are like 85% of farmers in Africa, across 80 to 85%, increase in productivity, access to markets means increase in revenues, increase in income, which makes it possible for farmers to invest in education for their kids, for them to invest in education, housing for themselves, for them to have much better nutrition. All of this contributes to a much more fulfilling and much more satisfying life. It also makes it possible for them to think of ways in which they can have an increase in quality of life. And our health work is also, it's also complementary to that, in that we see a number of diseases that can be eliminated. So we highlight those. We think polio should be out of Africa. We're working very hard on that. There are a few pockets left, we're working on them. We also think that, with much better access to care, particularly with the strengthened healthcare services, that a lot of the problems that have plagued women and children particularly can be resolved. For instance, in many countries in Africa, the maternal mortality, maternal deaths, women died because they got pregnant or because they're having a baby. In many parts of the world, these are issues that have been tackled. Africa can tackle them too. And we're working very hard on those. We're working in areas of nutrition because we believe that, particularly, the first few years, we call it the 1,000 days. That's when a woman is pregnant right through delivery and the first couple of years of the child. That if you're able to provide good, adequate nutrition, you set the child and the mother up for a very successful life. It's easier for them to reach their, potential mentally. It's also easier for them to do well educationally, and it's easier for them to get messages, communications that makes it possible for them to live relatively disease-free lives. So we work very hard on those. We're very active with the international agencies. The foundation was instrumental in the formation of Gavi, the Global Alliance for vaccines, and which has made it possible to immunize hundreds of millions of children. That's prevented at least 7 million deaths in children. We're very active with the Global Fund for HIV, malaria, and TB. We're providing quite significant funding, a lot of which comes to African countries. So in all, the vast bulk of the foundation's funding comes directly or indirectly to Africa.
I'll just take a moment to say that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as Ayo says, works with many partners. But if this couple was not motivated to make a change in the world, millions of lives would not have been transformed. And we'll come to the issue of African philanthropy in just a moment. But before we get there, we've spoken about health and agriculture, and I just want to get a sense of where you believe that African leaders are now in terms of delivering on promises that they are making. So we're now starting to hear African governments pledge that they're going to act. We've seen the Malabo Declaration and on agriculture, and you know, commitments made in healthcare and education and the rest of it. Particularly with agriculture and healthcare, though, are governments delivering on their promises, or are we not where we should be yet?
Well, we can always do better.
That's very diplomatic.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, this is, I truly believe that. I mean,
So we're not doing well, is what we're saying. We're
not doing as well as we could do. Which is why we feel that the assistance, the help that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation provides has helped in some instances to strengthen governments to deliver on the promises that they've made. Whether you're talking about health, or you're talking about agriculture, or you're talking about development in general. In some instances, what governments need is support in order to and technical assistance in order to get things done. But I actually believe that there is a climate of seriousness among leaders in Africa, and civil societies are increasingly more active. A good example is the recent elections in Nigeria, which is the first time a sitting government has been voted out of power by just the common person that believes that I have the power. I could choose to use it in this way. I think it's all very good. I'm not being diplomatic necessarily. I'm just saying that I rather see the glass half full than half empty. I've been around long enough to have seen the pace of development in Africa, 30 years ago and now, and I see a very big difference. In part because the population structure has changed. I mean, there is more younger people now. 60% of Africans are young people. And they don't necessarily believe that they are powerless, and many of them are very actively involved in, where you're talking of social media or you're talking about community participation. Everywhere, I find that to be incredibly uplifting. And I think the next generation will do a much better job than the current one, because that's how development happens.
Right,
The more we can educate, the more we can provide, support for them to grow to be, successful and productive people, the more we'll find the pace of development increase.
You've used a key word, which is education, and I've heard young people, sadly, I will reiterate, I've said it so many times on the show, I believe in young people, and you are the future. You're not the future, you are the present day. You are what will make Africa successful. And so many hopeful, hardworking, determined young people on the continent. But there are others who I have heard say, you have not given us the tools that we need to succeed. Our education systems are not what they should be. How do you expect me to survive in the world today with all these challenges, yet you have not equipped me? How would you respond to that?
Well, that is actually the part that I find most satisfying. My generation would never speak to their parents and ask and hold them to account. But I'm actually more accountable to my children than to anyone else. I don't want to do anything, because we have the same name, I don't want to do anything that sort of messes them up, because they will ask me. And I think it's that singular change in the attitude that, there's respect, yes, but there is accountability as well. You have an obligation to me as a parent, and I will insist on that because I know what those obligations are. That is the fundamental difference. And when you apply that to the larger community, they're saying to governments that, yes, you have certain obligations to me. And I'm not just going to sit here and wait. That is fantastic. That's just the part of it that that really excites me.
Thank you for that, because I keep telling my children to stop talking back to me and asking me. So actually, it's a wonderful thing.
It's fantastic.
I will stop now telling them, when I was young, I never asked my parents those questions. So it's a very interesting perspective.
I can give you examples of that where things I would never have done.
Yes.
That my children, I have 3 daughters. And, I fear them more than
So it's a lease of life that they have, and it holds us accountable, both as parents, but also as members of society. Let's come to now philanthropy and the role of Africans in really taking charge of transforming our own continent. We are starting to see African philanthropy happen, which is a good thing, from Dangote in West Africa all the way into East Africa, Manu Chandaria and many others. Do you think it will continue to grow, and how can we harness and build Africans spending money on growing African communities?
Well, I think this is another thing that perhaps is lesser known about the Gates Foundation. Not only did Bill and Melinda commit themselves to giving much of their wealth away, they've also got a lot of their friends and fellow billionaires to
do the same.
And so we now have more than 130 billionaires across the world who are part of the Giving Pledge, which is Bill's way of saying you don't really need all this for yourself and your offspring. You could use it for the larger good, for the larger community. And that's tremendous. But this year, they went one step further to creating the concept of the global citizen, which says that you as an individual, you don't have to be a billionaire, but you can participate in these philanthropic efforts because it makes life just better for everyone. And you feel better that way. And so we got this part of part of Bill's 2015 message is the idea of the global citizen, which is to encourage and stimulate each person in their own little ways to give more. Right. And that way we supplement or complement the efforts of government. And it goes much farther than just in the, governments providing services or doing little bits here and there. I'm really optimistic about that. I feel that, progress is made by all of us working in the same direction, and that direction is towards development, and that direction is towards personal commitment to making life better for others. It's a new concept. It's also an old concept, but this is the first time we're using the power of social media and all of that to make it much more widely known that you as an individual can do just a little bit on your own part by contributing to this to the idea of philanthropy.
And if you want to know more about it, the website is on the screen. Please do take a look and see if you can be part of contributing. Let's go now to the threats facing the continent today. If you were asked to highlight the major threats, 3 of them, what would they be?
Well, I think we still have pockets of insecurity, which makes it difficult to provide programs and services that reach people. Those are quite important. We still have way more poverty than is acceptable. Too many people are living below the poverty line. We need to accelerate the pace of development in general, and particularly eradicating poverty. I think there's way too many diseases that kill people unnecessarily. We have vaccines that can prevent some of those diseases, particularly in children. I think we could do a lot more. And frankly speaking, with all the work that we're doing in agriculture and productivity, far too many people go to bed hungry. Right. And so these areas are things that we can work on, we can make a difference in a relatively short period of time, because we've got the technology, we've got the resources, we've got the know-how, we need the will. And this is what's most important about. We need the will to deploy everything to all these resources that we've got, and we need the partnership that makes it possible to leverage and to build on each other's work and each other's contribution.
You've raised the issue of poverty, and Bill is passionate about the idea that we can end poverty.
Yes.
Let's talk about that a little bit. The small steps that it takes to get there. How can we do it?
Well, many countries actually do have poverty eradication plans. Those plans are fantastic. They're great.
But they seem very far removed from the realities.
The implementation, on the other hand, is another problem. Particularly in implementation of programs that reaches the common person, many of whom are probably excluded from, from the common, from easy interaction. I think that's why we talk about inclusion. And the people who are most left out of this are women and children, mostly. So we're highlighting the plight of women and children. I'm sure in this conference itself, you see a lot of emphasis on poverty is sexist because more women are affected by that. I think we have to pay more attention to the living circumstances of women and children, and make sure that they have the knowledge, the capacity that they need to improve themselves. And we have to be much smarter about how we do it. I think more countries are really involved in eradicating poverty. It's the implementation of the poverty reduction programs that's kind of problematic. And we're getting better. We're getting smarter about how we do the analysis and how we do the interventions that improve people's lives. We know what works. We just need to deploy them more, and that requires focus. It requires prioritization. And that's areas where the foundation actually provides help to countries.
Ayo, can we end poverty in our generation?
I think we can. Probably not in my generation, but certainly in yours.
I don't think we're that far apart, to be honest. But I won't say. Already we've come to the end of the interview, and really, please just look into the camera and deliver your message to Africans. How can we all be part of transforming the African continent?
Well, I think the transforming the African continent requires us to be attentive and to focus attention on what's really important. I think everyone has an opportunity to contribute. Everyone has an opportunity to be an actor, not just a recipient. Africa as a whole is moving from a continent that's just waiting for development assistance to one that's taking control of its own development agenda. And I think that happens at an individual level, it happens at a community level, it happens at a national level, and spreads to regional level. But it's important that each one commit themselves to doing just a little bit better each day. And together, collectively, it makes a huge difference.
Commit yourself to doing just a little bit better each day, and collectively, it makes a difference. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.